This isn't just a bull market setup. This is a structural shift in wealth, power, and global finance, and XRP and HBAR are sitting at the epicenter of it. Most people still think this is about price predictions or the next short-term pump. But for those who understand what's really happening, this is about positioning. Positioning for a transfer of wealth so massive it's being called the largest in human history. Over $80 trillion is set to change hands between now and 2045. That's not a guess. It's confirmed by institutions like Cerulli Associates, Morgan Stanley, and Fidelity. And while the headlines frame it as boomers passing wealth to millennials and Gen Z, that's only the surface layer. What's really unfolding is a deep reconfiguration of how money works. Not just who owns it, but how it's stored, moved, verified, and deployed. This generational shift isn't just about inheritance. It's about transformation. The tools and infrastructure used by the boomer generation, paper checks, legacy brokerage firms, centralized banking systems, don't fit the worldview or expectations of the generations inheriting this capital. The next wave of wealth holders grew up in the era of mobile banking, digital wallets, and decentralized innovation. They expect real-time access, digital native investments, and transparent systems that they can interact with on demand. They don't want to wait 3 days for a bank wire to settle. They don't trust centralized middlemen to handle transactions with excessive fees. And they're not impressed by outdated statements and complex custodial systems. They want programmable money, tokenized assets, and financial sovereignty. And that means the traditional institutions managing this wealth must evolve, or risk losing the next generation entirely. This is where XRP and HBAR come in. Because while most of the financial world is still pretending like nothing's changing, these two protocols are building the plumbing for everything that comes next. The $80 trillion transfer isn't just about who gets the money. It's about which systems get to move it, secure it, and settle it. And right now, that's being decided quietly behind the scenes. XRP isn't waiting for permission. It's already operating inside the corridors of international settlement. It's ISO 20022 compliant, tested in real-world scenarios, and capable of bridging currencies with minimal friction. HBAR, on the other hand, is building the compliance rails and enterprise-grade trust layer required to make tokenized economies actually work at scale. So no, this isn't about hype. It's not about chasing green candles. It's about identifying which technologies are positioned to absorb, redirect, and facilitate the most significant movement of capital in history. If you're paying attention, you'll realize that XRP and HBAR aren't just altcoins, they're financial infrastructure. And once the switch flips, once the inherited capital begins flowing through tokenized systems at scale, the protocols already embedded in that flow won't just rise in price. They'll become indispensable. That's why this only happens once. Because once the new system is running at full capacity, there's no reset button. The wealth has shifted. The infrastructure is chosen. And those who positioned early will no longer be chasing the opportunity. They'll be the ones everyone else is chasing. XRP and HBAR are infrastructure, not speculation. These aren't speculative meme coins or random altcoins. XRP and HBAR are deeply integrated into the backbone of the financial future being quietly constructed right now by governments, enterprises, and institutions. While retail investors are chasing green candles and meme momentum, the world's largest financial players are re-architecting their systems. And these two assets are part of the foundation. XRP isn't trying to create a new financial empire. Ripple, the company behind it, is focused on upgrading the very pipes that global finance runs through. And it's not theory, it's execution. RippleNet is already being used by over 50 institutions around the world to move real money in real corridors across Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. These aren't test environments. This is production-grade usage in cross-border settlement. But beyond the flashy partnerships, what really makes XRP crucial is its architecture. It's ISO 20022 compliant, meaning it speaks the language of global banks and settlement systems. This isn't about replacing banks. It's about integrating with them. That's how legacy money moves into digital frameworks without friction. Trillions in tokenized securities, digital bonds, and CBDCs will need compliant, high-speed settlement, and XRP is engineered for exactly that. Now let's talk HBAR. Where XRP dominates the conversation on liquidity and transfer, HBAR is taking the lead on infrastructure integrity, compliance, and enterprise-grade utility. Hedera hashgraph, the underlying network, doesn't run on blockchain. It uses a distributed ledger technology called hashgraph, which is faster, fairer, and more secure. Finality in seconds. Transaction fees under a penny. And most importantly, governance by giants. The Hedera Governing Council isn't a gimmick. It's a powerhouse. Google, IBM, Boeing, Nomura, Deutsche Telekom, Dell, and dozens more don't just sit on that council for press. They help run the nodes. They shape protocol development. They integrate it into their systems. HBAR is becoming the trust layer for institutions that are already embedded in every part of the global economy. HBAR is being used in carbon credit tracking, supply chain compliance, healthcare data integrity, and real-world tokenization, all at a scale that's invisible to most crypto investors because it's not pumping on Twitter. But the work is being done. And that's what matters when you're talking about a generational wealth shift. So when we say XRP and HBAR are infrastructure, we mean it in the most literal sense. They're the bridges, roads, and rails for how money, identity, data, and value will move in the next financial era. Not hype, not speculation. Embedded systems quietly onboarding the future. And once institutional money flows in at scale, through real-world asset tokenization, programmable CBDCs, and compliant digital finance, guess which protocols are already aligned with regulatory expectations and enterprise security requirements? Exactly. The ones everyone's sleeping on today. XRP, HBAR. Not lottery tickets, not trends, just infrastructure ready to absorb trillions. The rise of Hedera and the role of hashgraph. Now let's bring in HBAR. Most people in crypto hear not a blockchain and immediately tune out. But that's a mistake. Because Hedera isn't trying to win on hype. It's winning on architecture. Hedera is built on hashgraph, a distributed ledger that doesn't rely on traditional blocks and chains. Instead, it uses a consensus algorithm that's orders of magnitude faster, more secure, and more energy efficient than most of what the crypto market is even aware exists. BAR's entire thesis is built on trust. Not speculative trust, institutional trust. While blockchains fight over decentralization theater and narrative dominance, Hedera went in another direction. It built something that enterprises, governments, and Fortune 500 companies would actually be willing to use. From day one, it was structured for compliance, efficiency, and global-scale collaboration. And the results speak for themselves. Hedera is governed by a council of 39 multinational corporations, with rotating term limits and distributed authority. These aren't just names slapped onto a website, these are nodes and validators being run by Google, IBM, Dell, Boeing, Nomura, LG, Standard Bank, and others who already touch trillions in economic value annually. These are the same companies governments turn to for infrastructure, not for speculation. This is what makes HBAR different. It's not playing the same game as other altcoins. It's not trying to be money. It's not trying to be Ethereum 2.0. It's trying to be the trust layer for a digitized world. And governments are taking notice. The U.S. State Department recently included Hedera in official reports related to distributed ledger collaboration. The South Korean government is actively using Hedera for carbon emission tracking, because unlike proof-of-work chains, BAR's energy usage is microscopic. ESG concerns aren't just PR talking points anymore, they're becoming prerequisites for institutional deployment. And on that front, HBAR isn't just compliant, it's leading. But the real power of HBAR lies in what it enables. Secure, scalable applications across identity, compliance, data integrity, tokenization, and supply chain management. Imagine a world where your driver's license, your health record, your carbon footprint, and your real estate deed all exist as verified, secure, cryptographic data, and HBAR is the invisible layer making sure it all works without a hitch. XRP is the liquidity layer. HBAR is the trust layer. Where XRP shines in speed, capital movement, and financial messaging, HBAR excels in finality, governance, and system integrity. The two don't compete. They complement. The rise of Hedera is happening in silence. There are no laser eyes, no meme armies, no pump groups. Just some of the most powerful companies on Earth quietly standardizing their future infrastructure around it. And that tells you everything. HBAR isn't just another token. It's the framework for how global systems will validate, timestamp, and govern the digital economy. And when the $80 trillion starts flowing, guess which protocols will already be trusted, embedded, and running in the background. It won't be the ones screaming the loudest. It'll be the ones that already won the enterprise trust war. Hedera is one of them, and that changes everything. Institutions are already building the next layer. Now here's the kicker. The institutions managing this $80 trillion wealth shift are being forced to modernize. As the next generation inherits wealth, they're moving away from static, paper-based assets into tokenized, transparent, smart systems. That's why giants like BlackRock, Citi, HSBC, and JP Morgan are already experimenting with, or actively using DLT to tokenize real-world assets. They're not waiting for regulation to play catch-up. They're building now, and they're not doing it on a whim. They're responding to pressure from clients, investors, and global regulators who are signaling loudly that the old rails are no longer enough. Financial markets are demanding real-time settlement. Supply chains are demanding verifiable data. Compliance officers are demanding immutable audit trails. And legacy infrastructure just can't keep up. That's why distributed ledger technology isn't optional anymore. It's inevitable. In 2023 alone, we saw Franklin Templeton issue tokenized U.S. Treasuries. Citi published reports detailing how trillions in real-world assets will be tokenized by 2030. The London Stock Exchange announced a full tokenization strategy. The writing is on the wall. The global economy is transitioning to on-chain frameworks. And it's happening fast. But here's the part that retail continues to miss. Institutions don't adopt tech that isn't battle-tested. They don't risk trillions on hype. They move only when the infrastructure is robust, compliant, and scalable. And that's where XRP and HBAR stand out from 99% of the crypto space. These aren't just high-potential tokens, they're institutional-grade tools that already fit within the regulatory perimeter. XRP's role in cross-border liquidity is already acknowledged by central banks and payment providers. BAR's use cases are being rolled out in ESG data, supply chain management, and tokenized credentials across multinational sectors. These aren't just proof-of-concept demos, they're real deployments involving real data, real assets, and real oversight. Meanwhile, retail investors are glued to price charts. They see XRP trading at 50 cents and HBAR at 6 cents and dismiss them as underperformers. But that thinking reveals a complete misunderstanding of what's happening. These assets aren't built to ride meme cycles. They're built to anchor the next financial system. Remember how quickly the world shifted from Nokia phones to smartphones, from taxis to rideshare apps, from cash to contactless payments? Infrastructure transitions don't wait for everyone to catch on. They happen behind the scenes until one day they're everywhere. That's exactly what's happening now. The institutions are building. The rails are being laid. And XRP and HBAR are two of the most strategically positioned assets in that transition. Once this framework is fully operational, you won't get a second chance to front-run it. The gates will be closed. The rails will be chosen. And the same institutions everyone accuses of being late to crypto will have already made their moves, quietly, decisively, and permanently. By the time the media starts broadcasting it, it'll be too late. The infrastructure phase is when the asymmetric opportunity exists. And right now, we are smack in the middle of it. If you're still on the sidelines, understand this. Infrastructure isn't sexy until it's indispensable. And XRP and HBAR are about to go from overlooked to unavoidable. The future of finance is already under construction. And it's being built on ledgers most investors still don't understand. The wealth transfer only happens once. So when we say this only happens once, we mean it. Not in a dramatic way. In a mathematical, historical, and economic way. The numbers don't lie. The timeline is set. Over $80 trillion is scheduled to change hands between generations, and it's already begun. This isn't just the largest wealth transfer in history. It's the first time that transfer is happening in parallel with the rise of entirely new financial infrastructure. We've never seen this before. Not during the dot-com boom. Not during the rise of mobile. Not even during the Industrial Revolution. This time, the transfer of wealth isn't just generational, it's technological. And if you're holding XRP and HBAR, you're not holding hope. You're holding protocol-grade infrastructure that's been built, stress-tested, and positioned to sit underneath the world's most valuable transactions. Imagine being early to SWIFT, Visa, or the TCP/IP protocol, not just investing in a product, but in the roads and pipes every product will use. That's where we are with XRP and HBAR. And yet, most of the market still treats them like speculative assets instead of the foundational rails of a trillion-dollar rebuild. Everyone keeps asking, when moon? When pump? But the real question is, when utility? And the answer is right now. Because while the retail crowd waits for chart breakouts, the institutions are already integrating. The use cases are real. The infrastructure is live. And the capital is quietly positioning. This isn't about catching a wave. This is about owning the ocean. XRP is moving real money between central banks and corridors. HBAR is securing real data for ESG, government, and enterprise-grade networks. Together, they're forming the settlement and integrity backbone of a system that will quietly power trillions. Think about this. Once the infrastructure is complete, once trillions in tokenized bonds, carbon credits, real estate, and digital identity are flowing over these networks, you're not early anymore. You're just another participant in a system already built. That's why this only happens once. Because once the pipes are laid and the routes are chosen, the value gets locked in. The institutions that front-run the system don't wait for CNBC to confirm it. They move when the infrastructure is invisible to the public but already critical to the back end of capital markets. The $80 trillion isn't going to hit the blockchain like a tidal wave. It'll flow in quietly, through smart contracts, through tokenized fund shares, through CBDCs you don't even realize are running on Hedera nodes or using Ripple settlement tech behind the scenes. And when it does, it won't create hype. It will create inevitability. So if you're holding XRP and HBAR, understand what you're really holding. You're not betting. You're already inside the walls of the new system, but only if you stay the course. This is the moment before the lights come on, before the headlines catch up, before the valuations reflect reality. This is the window of asymmetric positioning. And once it closes forever. Focus. Stay informed. Don't trade foundational infrastructure for noise. The market will wake up when it's already too late. The wealth transfer only happens once. And if you're holding XRP and HBAR not as hype coins but as strategic assets, then you're already ahead of 99% of the world. Stay ready.